at 11:25 a.m. with our 147 participants. We do have quorum, so it is my pleasure to be able to call this 2021 annual meeting of the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee to order. Welcome, everybody. And I see BJ's asking, I know we're still having technical problems getting closed captioning. As soon as that becomes available, we'll have it turned on. I swear it worked during our practice sessions. I apologize that I'm not an expert on conducting meetings via Zoom, but we'll do what we can. Luckily, I've got the support of many people who know what they're doing. So the first order of business, right, is the approval of our 2020 annual meeting minutes. Hopefully everybody had a chance to look over those. They were sent out with the annual meeting communications. I know there's a link available on our website. So before we entertain a motion, like everybody have the opportunity, if anybody has any questions or concerns over the minutes, please raise your hand, put something in Q&A. So it looks like we've got if I'm reading this right, Mike, looks like we have a question from BJ.
She posed a question about the closed caption, and I responded that we're working on fixing that technology. There is a question from Jill Erickson about how multiple family members vote. That's
okay. All right. Sorry if I went over that too quickly. So you'll see 6 options in our poll, right? So that allows for 3 of them are labeled first person to either approve, reject, or abstain. And then 3 of them are labeled second person, approve, reject, abstain. So you should be able to select 2 options if you have 2 people joining you, to make sure we count all our members.
But if they're on different devices, separate devices, they should be able to vote from their single device.
Correct, yes. Okay. Here, Patricia, looks like you've got your hand raised.
I'm sorry, but I'm not seeing the poll. That's all.
I haven't opened a poll yet.
Oh, all right. I thought I was voting. I apologize.
Okay. Nope, we have not had a motion yet. All right. So Marianne, did you have a question or concern regarding the minutes? Looks like you're muted, Marianne. I saw your hand raised. All right. If not, BJ, I see your hand raised. Do you have questions or concern regarding the 2020 minutes? No, and lastly, I see a hand raised from Jackie.
Okay, thank you. I couldn't unmute. No, that was
okay.
Because of the captions. And
okay.
I just would like to make a point. It is not just me who uses them.
Oh, I understand. No, I use them as well.
Okay.
Okay. I saw your name I saw you had asked a question in the comments, so I was trying to address you directly.
Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, and I forgot to lower the hand.
Okay, thank you.
And Mark, we have a member asking where they can find the minutes.
So the communications that got sent out around annual meeting in your email would have a link, and I believe we have a link on our website. I think we can post, if someone could post a direct link to the chat. I don't have it in front of me this moment. Thank you, Tony.
Perfect.
Excellent. See, I told you I was surrounded by experts. So let's see, is there anybody else?
There's a couple of hands raised, and we may have been late getting to the allowing them to unmute.
I did. We heard from
Okay.
Patricia, and we heard from.
Okay. Looked like
I thought I asked for
Jackie.
Jackie. I thought I had. Yeah, I thought she. Jackie, you're still muted. Because I think I had allowed. There you go.
Please disregard.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So with no further discussion, then entertain a motion from any of our members to approve the 2020 annual meeting minutes. So I see we had a hand raised from Elizabeth Lentini.
Hi there, I'm moving. Can you hear me?
Yep, you can.
I would like to move that we vote to approve the 2020 annual meeting minutes.
And I see a hand from Kathy Porter.
I
Kathy,
second.
are you seconding it? All right, with it moved and seconded, let's try out this polling feature. And let's see, while we're polling. It looks like we have one call-in listener. Here, let me. Looks like just Ben has called in. I can actually text Ben. All right. So it looks like we had, if I can do my math quickly. All right, I see what, 123 approves and 3 abstains. So the 2020 annual meeting minutes pass. So before we get on to the rest of our content, rest of our business agenda, I want to take a moment to reflect on this past year and the journey that the board has been on, as well as the church. I know a year ago at this time, we were all already reeling from this pandemic. We didn't have the light at the end of the tunnel we now see. The church had just pivoted into the virtual realm without missing a step, but we had no idea that we were going to be operating this way for the entire year. But through the year, I mean, the church, well, and the board carried on. The board remained focused on governing, as is our charge from you, specifically through policy governance. And you've heard us talk about policy governance before and our journey on it. I know before I joined, our church has already identified our values and our mission during my first year, well, and our ends. And during my first year, we performed the research and discernment needed to create and formally adopt those policies that now define how the board governs, right? What our working relationship is with Reverend Jennifer and her staff, and what limitations are in place that set boundaries that they operate within. The year after that, right, we tried those policies out. Reverend Jennifer worked with the board to ensure that we all shared the same interpretation of what those policies meant and how we were going to measure compliance and progress, right? What's good, what's not good. And we took our first baseline measurements, which brings us to this past church year. This was the first time we've had the opportunity then to actually continue the cycle of monitoring and improvement, and where we could actually see how we've grown as a church in these areas. Now, I've got to say, back to a year ago at this time, I was a little concerned about how we were going to grow in these areas over a pandemic year, right? I mean, I know we were worried about the horrible loss of life and everything else that came with the pandemic, but as the board specifically talking about the business of our church, right? What would this do to our membership, to our programming, to our mission and ends, and our finances? Well, a spoiler alert for what you're going to see for the rest of our meeting today. Fast forwarding to now, it has been a horrible tragedy, but thank you to the wonderful work of our amazing ministers, staff, and volunteers, all of you. Church business is in good shape. Right? Our virtual worship numbers are reaching more people than we have ever reached before. In the board's congregational survey, our results showed that in this last year, our members value our ends more than they ever have before, as well as the church. We all believe, not only do we believe in them, but we're more committed to them and we're doing better at them. We continue to attract new members in this time when many churches are suffering and are challenged to find people, right? Our message still speaks to people and we're still welcoming new people into our beloved community. And on top of all of that, our members have maintained their commitment that they pledged to us prior to the pandemic and have seen their responsibility out. So we have seen a generous outpouring of support that has gotten us through this. So on our agenda today, we have more good news. We have a wonderful slate of candidates for board and nominating committee. That nominating committee has done a great job gathering over the last year. Noreen Gilbertson and Mark Chambers will talk to you about our financial condition and report on the stewardship work that has happened this last year. To address the questions we had and the concerns the board has had around finances, you've all heard us talk also about our financial sustainability and the challenges that we have faced for a long time. This church has faced for a long time around fundraising enough profits, enough income to match the cost of delivering the programming and the work of the church to our congregation, that we've been maintaining a deficit from year to year that we've been fortunate enough to cover from our savings. But the board, and I know the rest of the congregation, does not want to continue that way forever. So we've had a strategic planning committee that we asked to look at this last year and come back to us with findings. So they're here today to present a plan and get congregation feedback. Reverend Jennifer and our COVID reopening team has a plan for how we come back into the post-COVID world. And it's a lot of good news and a lot of great opportunity for us to hear from our congregation. So with that, I now turn the floor over to Michelle Bohm from nominating committee.
Good morning, everyone. First, I want to thank our amazing nominating committee team. We've had a really amazing year. So Tracy Keyser, Scott Henry, Vashti Lozier, Tom LaBelle, and Jean Johnson. They've dedicated a lot of time and talent during this crazy COVID year. and everyone helped to contribute to the nominations and the workings of our committee. There are 3 people who are completing their terms on the Board of Trustees. Those are Mark Bender, who you just heard from, Jane Peterson, and Melinda Vernon. So we have nominated 3 more people to take their place for 3-year terms. And the people that we nominate are Tony Pansiera, Patricia Guinan, and George Bledsoe. If anyone has any questions or concerns, please enter those in the Q&A.
And it looks like we also have, it's like Ben and Jason on the phone. Either of you have any questions? Please feel free to unmute yourselves. No, I do not see. Oh, Bernice, looks like you have your hand raised. Although you're muted. If you have a question, you're welcome to unmute.
I do not have my hand raised.
Oh, okay. My mistake. All right,
Mark, I don't see any questions or chat. So I think we can accept a motion.
sounds good. So in that case, I would entertain a motion for the nomination of George Bledsoe, Patricia Guinan, and Tony Pansiera for 3 years on the Board of Trustees. I see Rod Depew. Rod, are you making the motion?
Yes, I move.
And looks like Geraldine. Do you second?
So move. I mean, so second. Thank you.
All right, so motion's been moved and seconded, and I will.
Excuse me. I did.
Everyone should see the poll. It looks like Cecile, you have your hand raised. Is there a question?
Yes, my poll appeared and then disappeared. I didn't have time to vote.
Okay, well, I'll ask you and Jason and Ben, who are on the phone. If you're in favor, you can say aye.
Aye, but I'd like to vote for my husband too. He also wanted to vote.
Aye from Jason.
All right. So Russ?
Russ and
Russ is-
Cecile, aye.
Aye, from Russ also. Okay, sorry, Cecile, I wanted to make sure Russ, you're from Russ too. And anybody opposed who's called in? Nope, so it looks like we have, let's see, 131 plus 135 approved and 2 abstained. So our slate for the Board of Nominees passes. Board of Trustees, sorry. So the second, so actually back to Michelle for
One more.
one more.
One more. Okay, so this is for the nominating committee. So myself and Scott Henry are retiring from the nominating committee, and Heather Hansen is unable to complete her 3rd-year term on the committee. So we have 3 people to nominate instead of 2. So we nominate Susie Seidelman and Christine Hansen for 3-year terms, and Jesse Moffett for 1-year term to finish Heather Hansen's portion. If anyone has any questions or concerns, now is the time to enter those into the Q&A.
Okay, I don't see any questions.
No.
No. Cecile, I think you still have your hand raised. Do you have any questions about the nominating committee? No. All right, with that, I will begin the poll. And I apologize, panelists, I forgot to check to allow all of you to vote as well.
Can you hear me now? Am I unmuted?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say, I think we need a motion. I enthusiastically move to approve Christine, Susie, and Jesse.
You're right, I'm not following my Robert's rules. All right, so we have.
Who made that motion?
Alexis
That was
Felix.
Alexis, yes. So do we have a second to move to Alexis's motion to approve our nominating committee slate? Bruce, is that your hand raised?
Yes. I second the motion.
All right. So let me try this again. Practice makes perfect. There we go. All right. Looks like votes are still coming in. Okay, looks like we've got an overwhelming majority with 100 and what's that, 35 for and 1 abstain. So thank you, Michelle. The slate of Christine Hansen, Susie Settleman, and Jesse Moffitt passes for nominating committee. Congratulations. All right, so next on our agenda, Noreen Gilbertson is here to share the church's financial condition with us.
Morning. I'm Noreen Gilbertson. I'm the chair of the finance team, and I'm going to share a PowerPoint full of numbers. If you do not like numbers, just rest assured that we have a very, very strong finance team this year, as in previous years. Let me start the slideshow. We've got Gordy Miller, who's our accounting expert, and Trent Muller, who is an expert in financial planning. Ron Oshima is our banking guy, and both he and Holly Patzer are nonprofit experts. And Ali Yaberg is a past chair and has been on the finance team for quite a while. So Tom Briscoe is our treasurer, and Jean Johnson is our staff lead, and Jean knows everything. So basically what the finance team does is every month we monitor the current financials. We check the income versus expenses and make sure we're on track according to the budget. We look at the performance of the investments and we monitor that and manage it. We analyze financial data. We develop strategies. We just finished next year's budget. And then we act as the financial resource to the board. So today I'm going to talk about 2 years. The first year is the year, fiscal year 2019-20, and this is the year that's in the annual report. So this is actually the year that ended last June 30th. So it's a while back. So it was a normal year until March, and then COVID hit, and then we went online. So that's the main part to get it into the annual report. And then at the end, I'm going to talk about what went on this year, which is really interesting. COVID affected the entire year, and this year ends the end of next month. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is first looking at income expenses for the year ago. So what we had budgeted was pledges of $703,000, which is kind of the typical number for the last few years. But we found out that, and probably because of COVID, that the actual pledges went down, a bunch of people moved away. So we actually had pledges shrunk by 2.4%. The total income shrunk by about 3.8%. So, you know, we had to cut a lot of activities and so that brought down those numbers. Next, we'll add in the expenses, and human resources is the vast majority of our expenses. And we had, it went down a little bit, 4.6% versus what we budgeted at 774. This was because we had a couple of open positions for part of the year. We had a facilities assistant drop out, and also a partial year of communication coordinator. So our human resources went down a little bit. Our total expenses went down a little bit too. We didn't have to pay for a lot of the expenses that last part of the year. So that did help a little bit. So the most important part of our income and expense report is this net income, or income net of operation. So what we had budgeted for that year was 126,000 negative, but we ended up only in quotes, $106,000 in the negative. So the deficit did decrease by 16%, which is a help. In the big pictures of things, we would like to see that deficit number drop by about $25,000 a year until we get to sustainability. Then the fun part usually comes in the extraordinary income, and that's where we is outside of the budget numbers because we don't know what will happen. So the good thing that happened that year is that the staff applied for a PPP loan for COVID support, and we were approved for this forgivable loan for $118,000, which starts out being a liability, but then once it's forgiven, then that is income. And it's good to know we just in the last month did get forgiven for this loan. So we, in this current year, it becomes an income item. The big unknown here is always the investment loss or gains. And if you remember that last year, the stock market was going up and down and up and down. And by June 30th, we ended up with a little bit, $7,000 worth of gain on the general fund, which is very small since our general fund has about $1 million in it. But it wasn't negative, so that is good. This chart shows you our total assets. We have a $1.8 million of assets. This shows where it sits. We always keep about $300,000 in CDs, and that's what we treat as our safety net. We have a little Calvert fund, which is business development for underdeveloped countries. We have the Memorial Trust Fund, which is a restricted fund, has $329,000. We can't touch the money in that fund unless we have, I think, a super majority or something of the vote of the congregation. So basically, we just leave. We don't consider that as accessible money. We have cash of $176,000, which goes up and down. That's the money we use to pay all the bills, the salaries, and all the stuff that we need. And then our largest is the general fund, where we have $1 million in the UUCEF. This is where we're keeping right now our funds that we have. They're doing quite well. And they also put their money in companies that we approve of. So they're not doing oil and gas and that kind of thing. So let's just take a quick look at how we're doing with our quest to become sustainable. In order to become sustainable, we have this tool that predicts how we're doing. And what we try to do every year is to increase our pledges by 6%. HR, we expect that it probably will average an increase of 3%. And we expect that expenses will increase yearly by 1%. So that's kind of what we set ourselves up to achieve. And then that in year 2019, we didn't get the pledge increase we hoped for. We got a 4.2% increase in pledges. Our HR expenses increased by 6.6%. And that's mainly due to the fact that the previous year we had an interim DRE, and then we got Reverend Kimberly joined us as the full-time DRE. So that's a little adjustment. And then the other expenses increased by 24%, but that was primarily due to the choices that we made, we being the church, the board, choices that the board made and what that year should look like. We had some capital maintenance projects that we wanted to get done, so that increased. And then the Krug projects that we had voted on to meet our ends. So we had a social justice intern, we had this live streaming project, a bunch of Krug donations for projects, sound system upgrade. And then with Alyssa, we had this music program funded. So all of these things are monies that the church and the board wanted to do in this year. It was a little bit messed up because of COVID, but that was why the expenses increased so much. So from a visual point of view, this is a graph that shows sustainability. We have income in purple on the bottom, expenses are blue at the top. And then we have this dashed purple line that shows extraordinary income. That's kind of the fluff, the frosting, but we're focusing on expenses and income, and we want to make sure they match each other. So if you look at the right side of the curve, you see that they match around 2027, 2028. This obviously can change because every year is different. So basically, that's what we want to achieve to make the church sustainable, which is another one of our ends. All right, so that's all I'm going to say about that previous year. Let's talk about the current year. Kind of going to go through the same thing, but this year looks so much better than last year. It's quite a happy thing. Pledges have been doing really, really well. We budgeted $685,000 for pledges. We basically take what the pledge team gives us, and we usually take off 3% because of that we won't expect to see based on history. This year, because it was so strange with COVID, we took off 4%. So we only expected to see $685,000 in pledges, but we've already received $644,000, and we're only 10/12 of the way to the end of the year. So that's great. And the finance committee is working our forecast. We think we might be able to get to 735,000 this year in pledges, which is incredible. Our total income is 785. That's not quite what we were expecting, but considering the fact that we had limited activities and investments, and here investments means interest rates. Interest rates really went down this year. And then our apartments, we had two, at some time, we had 2 empty apartments. We had to do a bunch of renovations. So we didn't really get as much money as from the apartments that we usually do. HR expenses, our current budget, and then we've got $606,000 actual for HR expenses versus our budgeted 778. Our forecast is that the HR will come in at 752, which is just the effect of the staff. Some of the staff, the facilities assistant is still gone. And so our total expenses, though, are significantly less than what we expected because of online services and deferred capital maintenance. So the first time in years, at the years I can remember, our net income of operation, we had budgeted at minus 152. We're actually right now seeing a positive value, and we think that by the end of the year, we're still going to remain positive net income of about 25. We still have some contributions that we have to make that are scheduled. But this is the best we've seen in a long time. Now, next year, we're going to go back to the normal schedule. So, and we're not going to see that next year. I'll just say that, but we can be really happy about this year. And finally, we go to the extraordinary income. We have the 118,000 because our loan was forgiven. So that becomes income, but the investments has really done well this year. We have 220, as of March 31st, we have $225,000 of investment gains. And the stock market is still doing well. So we think we might be able to get maybe 300 if we're lucky. Of course, we can't really ever, you know, we never know. So, but the stock market's done well. So we are benefiting from that also. So that is what I have for this year. I think we have time to ask some questions.
Noreen, we had a question from Eileen Tosca wondering why our investments might not have performed as well as the market as a whole or the Wisconsin State Pension Fund. Now that question was raised during your comments about the 19 and 20 year, the 2019-2020 budget.
Oh, why it didn't work out well?
Why it didn't perform as well as things like the state pension fund.
Yeah, I think that number, remember, is it, you have to compare dates. Because I remember after the, and I have to look at my notes, but at times we were in like a positive 100,000, and then we were minus 50,000, and then we were, it ended up at 7,000. So remember, if you want to do an A to B comparison, our fiscal year is from, you know, July 1st through June 30th. So if we were to do an annual comparison, that $7,000 is not a valid thing. So I would say make sure that we're looking at the same period of time. With that year, since it was so volatile, it really makes a lot of, it's really important, makes a big difference which date you're looking at. Did I answer that question okay?
I don't see any follow-up from Eileen on that.
Okay.
And Elizabeth Lentini wondered if you wanted to make any comment about how our general fund got so large through generous bequests and things like that.
Well, it got large because of bequests. You know, we had the Krug bequest, we had several, we had a big donation, a couple big donations this year, like that added in. One of the things when you look at this, I always thought this was a huge amount of money. But when we had our consultant, when the board had their consultant come in this year, and we went through all this information with him, he was telling us that he believes that a church of our size should have on the order of $3 to $4 million, which burst my bubble. But basically, yes, the general fund increases because of number one, generous bequests, and number two, gains on the market. Keep in mind too that anytime we have a deficit, we're essentially reducing the amount of money that we have in the general fund, which is why we certainly don't want to carry these deficits with us, because we don't want to reduce the assets that we have.
Also, by following a socially responsible investment practice, might that keep our returns slightly lower than the general market as a whole?
You know, it might, but when I did the analysis, when I do a quick analysis comparing what the S&P is doing. It's not, it seems to be doing comparatively. Yeah, maybe next year what I will do is put a graph in there that compares the S&P with our general fund. And that would be a good idea. That would give us the answer to that, because I remember we had that question last year. Yeah, that would be helpful. I belong to an investment club, and we always compare our investments with those of the S&P to make ourselves feel better. So yeah, that's something I'll put together.
Rod Botts had a question about what goes into the general fund as opposed to the Memorial Trust Fund.
Well, nothing, when people donate money, they can either choose to put it in a restricted fund or an unrestricted fund. So if it's unrestricted, it means that the church can do what they want with the money. So that goes in the general fund. The only thing that goes into the memorial fund is the investment gain or loss from the UUCEF. That money gets put in there. The money that I presented in the previous slide, that's the money that's going into just the general fund.
Can I ask a question? I have my hand raised.
Sure, Bruce.
Hang on a second, Bruce. I just wanted to say, in response to that Rod Botts question, this is Jennifer speaking, that people who designate their bequests for the Memorial Trust Fund, also those bequests go into the Memorial Trust Fund, but people would have to designate their bequest for it.
Thanks, Jennifer, for making that more clear. But I don't think we have had any restricted bequests in my memory, which is fairly short. So, but thanks.
Bruce, did you want to pose your question?
Yeah, one of the significant things to some of us is the socially responsible investment policy, and especially the community investment that was developed with the Social Justice Council. We are investing in our community of Milwaukee for social good. Can you say just a few words about that, Noreen, please?
Yes. Let's see. I wanted to show that. I didn't know whether I should talk about that this year or not. If you look at this chart of where our assets are, there's going to be another little sliver in there for $10,000 for a program that we joined. The UU had matching funds up to $10,000 for donating to local businesses, essentially. And we have joined forces with WIBIC, which is a local group that helps small businesses with loans. And so these are people that would be our neighbors, and they need some loans. Our church funds get put into a big basket with other people's funds, and WIBIC is then allowed to loan people money to get their businesses going. It's a really great program. There was a forum on it a couple weeks ago, and Social Justice put this together. It was approved, worked with finance with Trent Muller from finance. And then now there's a group of people in both teams that worked that out. Bruce was very, very instrumental, as well as Trent. So Bruce, do you want to say anything else about it that I missed?
No, thank you. That's a good summary. People can go see the forum that was recorded on April, I think it was April 27th. So if you want to know more about WIBIC, which is the Wisconsin Women's Business Investment Corporation, and how our money is going to be used for social justice in Milwaukee, go to that forum. That's a good description of it.
And also, it's not just for women-owned businesses, even though that's in the name. So it is for any businesses can apply for these funds.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Any other questions?
The only other question I see is asking, Deborah Klepp asked, what was the total amount of bequests this year? I'm not sure if that'll be answered by the Strategic Planning Committee in their presentation or not.
Yeah, we did receive an anonymous a $25,000, wasn't a bequest, but let me, and we also, our bequest income, well, totaled $25,000 this year. There was, let's see. Yeah. Oh, wait. Oh, that's last year. Okay. This year, this is very complicated. It's because I'm constantly thinking of 3 years, last year, this year, and next year, because we just finished the budget. But we did receive, let me open this. If there's any other questions while I'm opening this up, I can.
This might be a quick answer. Do the gains from the Memorial Trust go into the general fund?
No, they go into the Memorial Trust.
Thank you.
Okay, so here we are, income. All right, our bequest income for this year was $32,000. Any other questions?
All right. I think if not, thank you, Noreen, for all this insight. And I know these numbers are all available in our annual report. If anybody has, hey, get off me. Anybody has any other questions or concerns, feel free to address finance or the board. And be on the lookout for further communications, because this is a conversation we want to continue.
Yeah, if you want to email me, feel free to email me and I can give you more detailed answers. So thank you.
So next up, related, we have Mark Chambers with our stewardship report. Tell us about how,
we have transitioned to the PM, so good afternoon, First Church. My name is Mark Chambers, and I had the good fortune of chairing the pledge drive and committee this week and even this year, and even better fortune to be surrounded by a committee and volunteers and staff who provided incredible support. It was a joy to work with this group of committed First Church members. Start off, then I want to thank all the rest of you who have so generously made pledges this year. I suspect that many of you would have likely done so, whether you were asked or not. But this pledge campaign is, I think, a real important stewardship practice in engaging us as a community in reflection and conversation about the meaning and value of First Church in our lives. Like everyone else, we've been challenged by the pandemic and the usual celebratory kinds of events that are part of the campaign that bring us together and generate the energy that's important to have in moving the pledge drive forward were not available to us in the same way. So we had to get a little creative. And we did a number of things a little differently. We gathered and worked with a number of people to train our committee and a group of 12 other volunteers as Zoom masters, and essentially invited the entire congregation to participate in the kind of conversation I just alluded to. Now, this wasn't all a group of 20-somethings, preternaturally skilled matters of technology. So we had some brave, courageous people conducting Zoom meetings. And while we weren't as successful in attracting as much of the attention we wanted, we communicated with a lot of folks. We did a couple of other things a little differently too. We made a specific effort to do more personalized kind of communication and letter writing, which was a task that the committee embraced and pursued with great intent. And similarly, we made an effort to appeal to past pledgers, people who had lapsed pledges, and were successful in increasing pledges this year among that group. Lynn, if you could kind of begin to throw up a little bit of the information data that will show the kind of success we had this year. And I do think we should feel good about how things transpired despite the pandemic and the challenges we faced. As you can see from this, we had 184 members, greater number than last year that increased their pledges from last year. And if I'm not wrong, this group itself showed an 8% increase in pledge increases. 148 remained the same and 16 decreased, which is a smaller number than in past years. And as Noreen mentioned, we shoot for a 6% increase from one year to the next, and it looks as though we're going to get there. Our all-in, I'm sure you didn't you didn't fail to notice our theme for this year, all in sustaining First Church. We are close to our 100% goal with 97% of the community participating so far, with things still to come in terms of a number of things that increase membership, increase pledges before the year's out. And I should make a point here. There are a number of pledges still outstanding. So if you haven't pledged yet, it's never too late. Don't hesitate to fill out that form. It is available on the website, and I would encourage you to do so. Move on to the next slide. I'll show you a little bit more data about what it is we experienced this last year. The $739,695 of pledges in hand exceeds that of the total pledge amount to date of both last year and the previous year. So we should feel pretty good about that. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, there are still some previous pledgers that we haven't heard from, and we kind of adjust projecting wise what that might look like in terms of dollar amounts. And accounting for all of the various adjustments that are made, we're looking at about $735,000 of pledge income for this year. And that does account, as you can see here, for the shrinkage that is typically a part of the year unfolding. I mentioned the gratitude and appreciation that I have for the volunteers that have helped with this effort. And Lynn can show you the cast of characters that were part of this effort. And pledge team members, if you're out there, and Alexander, Bob Balderson, Pat Burns, Jeff Hansen, Deb Maskey, Pat McFarland, and Jackie Zandy, please stand up and take a bow. And I don't mean to minimize any of the other folks, but these are the people that met for 3 or 4 months, a couple of times a month in pulling the pledge effort together and achieving the success that we did. Would never want to neglect or fail to mention the support that we get from our staff. Lynn Jacoby assisted us in kind of giving physical form to the ideas that we had and the communications that we had and the images we created that proved to be, I think, again, a real creative effort on the part of the committee and staff. That pretty much constitutes my report. If there are any questions from anyone, I'm happy, along with Lynn's assistance, to try to answer them.
Sorry, we did have a question about how many non-members made pledges.
I'm going to have to rely on Lynn for that. Do we have a handy reference to be able to answer that question, Lynn? I'm not sure.
I don't have an exact number, but I would say it was about a couple dozen.
And as you probably know, non-member means they essentially, they qualify in some ways, having made a contribution, but they kind of haven't signed the book, so to speak. And as a result, they are not constituted as members.
Yeah, and of course more when we talk about spouses of members, because we always count them as sort of pledging friends, also part of the community. And certainly people who are not members but are pledging are, also.
And the question, relative to what the number 435 represents, yes, it's pledge units, pledge households, yes.
Harry Wiggins had a question regarding members requesting waivers, I believe you meant?
Yes, we are a inclusive and inviting community, so that there are instances in which members are in a position or are not in a position to make the kind of pledge contribution that they might be inclined and want to, so they're granted waivers for the pledge year or a particular period of the pledge year. And still counted as members, still counted as part of the pledge effort.
So I think in the spirit of getting to all our topics today, we should move on. If anybody has additional questions, we'll have time at the end, both during our new business, and then obviously you can reach out to us individually. We'd be happy to provide more information. Right. So next on the agenda is, as we talked about earlier, we've talked about our financial gap between income and expenses. So what we bring in total versus what it takes to run our church and do the work of the church. We have our board appointed strategic planning team here to provide an update. During the last church year, the board recognized this need for both short and long-term strategic plans to address those issues and to look in both to closing that gap and looking at growth, and to explore the background behind it, what our options were, and return to the board and congregation with recommendations. They've been working this last year and have their first round of recommendations based on their findings. So we'd like them. We have, for the strategic planning team, we have Julie Bach, Dave Becker, and Amanda Pansiera here today to share those with us, after which we would like to participate in a congregational vote then of support with moving this direction forward.
Great. Thanks, Mark. I'm going to start us off. Just to give you some background, in the team's first meetings in 2020, when we were convened, we prioritized two immediate concerns: growth and financial sustainability. In the fall of 2020, utilizing the funds from the Lou Krug bequest, we hired experienced congregational consultant, Reverend John Wimberly. And he gathered information from church staff, he interviewed lay leadership, he conducted research and delivered reports with findings and recommendations on growth and financial sustainability to us. These reports in hand, we decided, the strategic planning team, to conduct listen and learn sessions. We conducted 14 of them, where we presented John's reports and we gathered feedback. Nearly 200 church members and staff attended. Thank you. The strategic planning team then summarized what it heard from our community, and we gave that information to the Board of Trustees, as well as we delivered high-level recommendations to the board, and that happened at the March meeting. Which brings us to where we are now. That would be the big blue arrow. We'll present what we have heard in the listen and learn sessions, and we will talk about the recommendations we delivered to the board. The board will then be asking for a vote from the congregation to affirm this new direction in regard to financial sustainability. In the short term, the next steps for the strategic planning team will be to support the implementation of the recommendations. In the medium and long term, we will be shifting our focus to address other areas in need of strategic planning.
Thank you, Julie. This is Dave Becker. We would like to thank everyone who attended the listen and learn sessions and those who submitted their feedback online. There was excellent discussions on how we as an organization can do better when it comes to the strategies for growth and achieving financial sustainability. Not surprisingly, among us we heard a diverse array of feedback, but without a doubt, we hear loud and clear that we as a congregation want to grow our mission and impact within and outside the congregation. In these sessions, we were able to have a clear and frank conversation about our church's finances over the past years, and we heard that church members would like more frequent, clear updates on our finances. While we love our church, we understand more clearly that we as a community haven't been adequately funding all of the services and programs that we have come to know and love and expect from our church, hence the gap that Noreen identified. While there is some concerns about increasing the ask during a time of economic hardship, many members expressed a willingness and ability to give more. We heard the need for more and different ways to give that appeal to all generations and engage friends of the church as contributors. Members need to feel more connected to why and what they're giving to. And we need to explore different channels to connect with the wider community and the new and varying paths to membership. We also understand that our new push for financial sustainability needs to be different this time by establishing concrete goals, a clear timeline, and a solid plan for what will happen if we don't meet our goals. We also note that we have learned that growth of membership alone cannot solve the church's financial issues. While growth is certainly a subject of strong interest here, we understand the issues of financial sustainability need to be addressed first in order to solidify the foundation of future efforts to grow our impact in the wider community.
So in the listen and learn sessions, our consultant presented 3 options for how to proceed with our finances. The first was cut our expenses immediately, up to $150,000, or 2, deplete our savings and financial reserve, or 3, increase our revenue. The overwhelming response from our members was for option 3, grow our income and close the budget gap between revenues and expenses. So based on the vast experience of our consultant and the work of previous committees, including the income opportunity team, we've identified these ways to grow the church's revenue. The great results of this spring's pledge drive are encouraging, and we know that more transparency and education around the church's finances, similar to the listen and learn sessions, will likely encourage pledge increases from many members in the future. This income endowment is an entirely new strategy that First Church has not pursued before. It would be raised through a special fundraising campaign over the next several years. The investment principle of this fund would not be touched for operations, but the interest it earns can be funneled toward the church's operating budget. It will need to be millions in order to generate an interest at a rate that would fill the budget gaps that we've experienced over the last many, many years. Increasing pledges and the income endowment are the two biggest levers we have to pull to improve the church's finances, and we've recommended that the board and staff explore many other avenues for increasing revenues. Financial sustainability will always be part of our work, and our strategies may grow and change, but this is where we have to start now. Finally, we'd like to address this question. How is this different than other times we as a congregation have attempted to address the budget gap? As mentioned, the policy for the new income endowment will strictly limit the use of its funds. The principal investment will never be touched, and only the interest income will be used to support church operations. We like to think of the endowment in the same way you can think of our beautiful church building, which we own outright. In the past, our beloved church community raised funds to pay for this building, and we, in future generations, continue to reap the benefits of this space for our worship services and gatherings in our ministries. In the same way, the endowment will be a gift to future generations of First Church. Second, the board and church leadership will set a timeline with detailed benchmarks to measure our progress on increasing income. If we don't meet those goals, there will be suggested consequences to decrease our costs, which could directly and negatively impact the church programming that we all know and love. So we'll now hand things back over to the board.
Thank you, Amanda. So with that, before we entertain a motion, so you see on the slide in front of you, what we're looking for the congregation or to the congregation for today is given those options that we were presented with of either cutting expenses, which again the strategic planning team has shown us that that we have a very modest set of expenses to begin with. That's been very well managed, cutting expenses, continuing to drain down our savings in perpetuity, or to raise income in order to support our financial sustainability that the strategic planning team and the board of trustees is putting forth option 3. So we would like to ask the congregation to for its support in pursuing option 3, growing church income to achieve financial sustainability, and that we as a community will take the necessary steps to do this. Does anybody have any questions or concerns regarding this report before we call for a vote? And it looks like, do I see a hand up from Tom Briscoe?
I think both Tom and Elizabeth had a question about the new income endowment proposal differs from the existing Memorial Trust Fund. And I will just say what was described by Amanda for the income endowment trust fund that we're talking about is very similar to what the Memorial Trust Fund does. The Memorial Trust Fund, again, as Reverend Jennifer said, it's a segregated amount that we both segregate both from our financial accounting standpoint, but also it's governed by a set of policy documents that describe strictly what happens with that Memorial Trust Fund. So again, monies that are designated in bequests that go into the Memorial Trust Fund, the principal, if you will, of the investment is not touched. The fund grows over time as an investment. There is a document that covers what that income does. The income is taken off at a rate of, I believe, 6% averaged over a 3-year period and does fund operations for the church. That is covered in the defining documents in the Memorial Trust Fund. What is beyond that, if it grows more than that, that growth stays in the fund. So again, the Memorial Trust Fund is segregated or separated from all the other unrestricted funds in the church. Now, on to this new income endowment proposal. You heard Noreen mention that simply for a church of our size, the consultant felt that that was a rather small amount for an endowment for a church of our size. Okay. So part of our proposal is we simply need to increase the amount of endowment that our church has. Now, the specific vehicle that we have, we think needs to have basically very similar or the same mechanisms as the Memorial Trust Fund. We need to have the investments segregated from an accounting standpoint in our church. We need to have separate policy documents that govern what we do with that investment. We need to protect the principal, and we need to allow for the income from that fund to help fund operations, because that is the purpose of our suggestion for financial sustainability, that we have an additional income stream from a larger endowment. Now, having said all that, we wanted to make sure that our first year was focused on this proposal and not get into the implementation details of, is it the same as the Memorial Trust Fund? What documents do we need to define that? All of that needs to be figured out. But at this point, the main point is we need a larger endowment, and we believe that we should have an endowment that helps fund the operations of the congregation.
Dave, we also had a question about, will the Memorial Trust Fund remain a distinct fund separate from the new endowment fund, or will it be merged?
Yeah, again, those are implementation details that we have not defined yet. Again, we're focusing on step one, which is simply define the strategic plan. The implementation details, we will either we or another group designated by the board will make recommendations on that in the coming year. I do see another one, a question from Bruce. Practically speaking, this means a big fund drive in the next year or two apart from annual giving. And I will say that, yes, part of this proposal is in order to raise a larger endowment, there would be a separate fundraising effort that would be separate from an annual giving fund drive. And again, that is something that we have done in the past. I think our last, we've had capital fund drives where our Fuel the Future drive in around the 2000 timeframe raised $1.25 million. We have had other drives to raise money. The Thrive Drive raised almost $1 million to help fund our growth plans in the early 2000s. So we have precedents of having large fund drives, capital fund drive, or other specific operation fund drives at the same time as running annual pledges.
Thank you, Dave. Are there any other questions anybody has or comments about the strategic planning team's report for us?
I see Rod Depew asked the question about, is this planned to be a 1-year or a multi-year drive? Again, these are some of the implementation questions that will be answered in the following year. I think if I take it a step above this and just say, Noreen shared the predictive model of how do we close the gap between annual income raised and annual expenditures. Okay, that has been a challenge for us. We've been talking about that for at least 15 years now. Closing that gap is the key. That is the end goal for us all. Okay, now we had a great pledge year this year, but having said that, this year was exceptional in so many ways. We are expecting that it will take multi-years to close that gap. In the context of that, how we look at these different possible streams to raise revenue, how we look at the endowment fund, all of that is likely to play out over the course of the next few years. It's not going to be next year and we're all done and moving on. So having put all that context around it, I expect that as we look at the fund drive for a large endowment, you need planning. You need to generally do an assessment of our capabilities, put things in place. Again, looking back at our last major capital fund drive, it was probably a 1-2 year planning process before you actually begin the fund drive. And fund drives allow more time for people to participate as well. So again, I don't expect this to be a 1 year and done activity.
Thanks, Dave. And that's right with this affirmation, we're looking for, not just this capital campaign, but the other work that's been involved that we've talked about before in your listen and learn sessions that many of you participated in, right? That there's a multifaceted approach that the strategic planning team is presenting for us, of which the capital campaign is a piece of. But we want to make sure that we're all in this together in doing what it takes to raise the income we need to close this gap. I know I personally don't want to see us continue spending down if there's nothing left to spend. And I personally don't see this church benefiting from us cutting the cost of doing church, because we have been very prudent with what we do. In fact, almost more to our detriment. So if I don't see, let's see, we have 2 questions here. So looks like Dorothy has also asked that since human resources makes up so much of our budget, what steps can we take to stop hiring staff every time we add funding? Dorothy and everybody else can chime in. Other panelists know this better than I do, but I will say we are not hiring staff regularly. We've been very prudent. And in fact, many of the staff are not being paid in accordance to UUA best practices that we would like to see taken care of in terms of and matching our values and principles. So I don't know if there's particular concerns around that, but I know we run a very lean ship, and I think our consultant has reaffirmed such that for a church of our size, there is not fat to trim. So let's see. I don't see any other hands raised or questions. So with that, I would entertain a motion from the floor. If anybody be willing to move the text that you see on the screen, that the congregation affirms its support for pursuing option 3 to grow church income to achieve financial sustainability, that we as a community will take the necessary steps to do so. I see Elizabeth. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Sierra has moved the motion.
I'd like to make a motion, so move the motion from the board. Do you need me to read it in entirety? I can.
I think we had Tony, BJ, and Elizabeth Lentini all raised at the same time.
Can I list Tony as the motion and Elizabeth seconding?
I'm satisfied with that. I'm glad to see the support. Thank you. With the motion moved and seconded, I will now open our poll. And remember, choose one of the first person options of either approving, rejecting, or abstaining for one of the people that's attending. And if you have somebody else with you, choose one of the second 3 options. And then press submit when you're done. going to end the poll. It looks like tapered off. And so I see overwhelming support of, press the share button. What is that, 118? 4? Actually 119, we've had a phone caller. And we had 6 abstains and one opposed. Sorry, 7 abstains, 1 opposed. So with that, I believe the motion passes, and that strategic planning team will continue this coming year to formulate the details of that plan, and we as a congregation will move forward doing what it takes to close this gap. Thank you, everybody. So the other big topic we have on our agenda tonight, Reverend Jennifer, would you like to share with the congregation the work of the COVID reopening team and what you have for us today?
Yes, thank you so much, Mark. First Church, it is my pleasure to introduce to you the work of the COVID reopening team, or the FUSM COVID team. We are a team of myself and Jean Johnson from the staff side, but our members, our lay leaders, are a doctor, a nurse, a healthcare administrator, and a professor of architecture. So we have folks with a lot of expertise in the field of health and buildings, which is very relevant to the transmission of COVID-19, helping make decisions about policy and procedure for how to reopen the church safely. And I just want to say before we begin that, we are in an adaptive learning environment. The scientific community keeps learning about this virus and its transmission, and the conditions that we're in Milwaukee keep changing. So our COVID team is going to keep adapting this policy as we learn more about the virus, as we learn from the scientific community, and as we watch what happens in Milwaukee County specifically. So over the summer, we're going to watch the conditions in Milwaukee closely, monitor how the CDC's new advice that of course they gave us no advice on Thursday when we were sending this out to you on Saturday, but we'll watch how that new advice affects the transmission rate and the disease incidence in Milwaukee. And we'll keep updating the policy and the precautions procedures as conditions and the learning happens. So I just want to say that the core of what this team has done has been about the safety and well-being of both our members and the community at large. Being a caring community is part of our reason for being as a church. Our mission is based on values of love and justice, and the reason that we exist is to care for one another and to care for the community and the public at large. So I want to name that the policy that we came up with is more cautious, and it's more slow moving than some other institutions in the area. And that is part because of our mission. Who we are as a congregation is focused on love and justice and inclusivity. And when I say inclusivity, let's keep in mind that we're an intergenerational community. The CDC advice that just came out was for vaccinated people, and we have to remember that at this moment in time, children are not able to be vaccinated, and children are people and they are members of our community. We know that our congregation includes elders and children. It includes people at all age ranges. And so to be inclusive of everyone in our community, we have to remember that not everyone can even be vaccinated at this point. Third, we're not going to require proof of vaccination for our members or friends to attend church or church events. And what that means practically is that we don't know what people's vaccination statuses are or why people's vaccination statuses are. And finally, our healthcare professionals have told us that because in the public at large, there are probably large numbers of people who are not going to be getting vaccinated, we won't reach herd immunity as the Milwaukee County. So that means that we really have to watch the incidence rate of disease in Milwaukee County. We know that your assessments of individual risk as people, as members, as individuals, and your vaccination statuses are probably going to be different than institutional and public assessments of risk. So just keep in mind that the church is a public institution and that we have to make different risk assessments based on being an institution rather than a vaccinated individual that might make different choices. And finally, we have to have a little bit of time to get ready. To reopen the church is going to take time and energy to do safely and to do well. That's why we're not planning on reopening the building doors until September, because we have to figure out how to do it safely and to do it well. So we also want to make sure that we do it with multi-platform church, with the ability to do it online. So that means that staff needs some time to figure out how to do everything. So thank you for your patience as we move forward. And with that, I'll hand it over to our actual experts, Eric.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the introduction there. I think that sums up a lot of what we've been working on here. Pull this up here. So yeah, just to introduce the team once again. Pull up for me here. So yeah, you'll be hearing from Lisa Konechny here in a minute, but also wanted to thank from First Church, Gene Johnson and Jennifer Bergstrom, and then we're also joined by a couple of great lay leaders in Canaan and Block. I'm really proud of this team. Put in a lot of work, a lot of hours. There are a lot more hours still ahead that we're going to put in. So if you get a chance to thank Lisa, Jean, Stacy, Jennifer, please, I'm very appreciative for all of their efforts. So we'll attack this information here. So as Jennifer was saying, the main thing that we're looking at here, I want to teach you one scientific term today, and that is infection incidence. The reason why we are using a scientific term is we want to be really specific and explicit about what we're talking about so there's no confusion. So again, we're looking at this term infection incidence in Milwaukee County. Basically what that means is just the number of new infections in a specified time period. So how many new infections did we see in the last week? To make matters a little bit more confusing, the way we express this is the number of new infections per 100,000 population per week. Don't even think about why that is. It's not important. The reason we frame it that way is because that's how the CDC frames it. That's how the Milwaukee Health Department frames it. We want to all be speaking the same language. If we're all trying to measure out a race and someone's measuring in miles, someone's measuring in centimeters, and we're trying to do furlongs, it's going to get confusing. So we express it this way because that's what the scientific community expresses it as. Now, if I'm losing you, if this is starting to already get too complicated for you, the good news is you can tune out. That is perfectly fine. You do not need to understand a word of our presentation here because we are going to make sure that we communicate with this with you. A big portion of every meeting that we have is on communications. So what does that mean? If you say, I trust these guys, they're going to have me covered. How do you find out if church is open? It'll be on our website. It'll go out in email blasts on Friday and Saturday. You'll be able to see it on our social media posts. You'll be able to call in and it'll be on the outgoing message. We'll try to put signage on church that explains it. So again, it will not be difficult for you to ascertain whether we're open or closed. That being said, I get that there are a lot of inquisitive First Churchers out there. So if you want to understand more, you can follow me down a little bit deeper here. So why this incidence thing? And really, I know you've been bombarded with numbers over the last year plus, and it gets really confusing, but try to boil this down to your inner 7-year-old. Really just think about this. When is it a bad idea for us to be meeting in person? When there's a lot of disease going around, that's bad. When should we meet in person? When there's a really small amount of disease going around. That's really all it comes down to, and that's what incidence helps us measure, is how dangerous is it out there in our community. Now, you may think kind of the corollary here, well, what about vaccination rate? Everyone's telling me we need 70, 80, 90% of people vaccinated. Well, that doesn't really reflect the disease level is the problem. And as Jennifer said, we're not going to reach a full herd immunity with vaccination. That being said, as people get vaccinated, the incidence number is going to come down. If it doesn't, that means there's a problem with vaccination, with in terms of new variants emerging or immunity waning. So again, we're still doing the right measure. That being said, it doesn't really do any of you any good to sit at home and stew about what the incidence rate is. If you want to actually do something to help us get out of this, go get vaccinated. Encourage your family to get vaccinated. Encourage your friends. This is, really consistent with our UU values to help protect not only yourself, but people around us. And we're really going to stick with these scientific criteria to make sure we keep things safe, because as Jennifer said, every discussion we have starts from a place of safety. Okay, so now we know why incidents. We understand that. Let's look at numbers. That's the hard thing. We have to boil this down to actual incidence numbers. Well, our first kind of category here doesn't have a number. That's for this very specific issue of in-person pastoral care. In vaccinated clergy, we're proposing can perform this immediately. It's very safe according to CDC guidelines. It's important work, so we don't want to really put a lid on that. But when we start to look at these incidence numbers, I'm going to throw three numbers at you: 100, 50, and 10. Those are going to be sort of our three levels that we're looking at. So once we get to that 100 cases per 100,000 people over 7 days, we suggest that we allow memorial services. There's been a lot of grief in the last year, but not necessarily a lot of great outlets for grieving. And so we want to make sure that we allow that as much as possible. We're going to restrict that just to outside or in the sanctuary for capacity reasons and limit that to 25 people. So our next tier down is when the incidence gets below 50. At that point, we think that we can do small groups. Limit of 20, and again, there are going to be some very specific room capacities in First Church. And again, we strongly recommend that everyone be vaccinated, but we will not be checking. That is your personal decision. And then our last most restrictive level is below 10 cases. That's when we can get in-person worship, large groups. Basically, we don't have to worry about capacity at that point anymore. We will still have appropriate precautions in place, but the capacity won't be an issue. Now, this last point, we do know that gathering outdoors is a lot safer. So we have a couple of exceptions for that. So again, once we fall below that 100 number, we say that we can get together outside in groups of 25. Once we fall below an incidence of 50, then we'll up that to 50. So kind of technical details here, we're not going to just dive head first. If we see a good number one day, we're not proposing to say, okay, we're going to open everything up. We want to prove that these infection levels are durable and sustainable. So once we see, for example, falling below 100, we want to achieve that for 28 consecutive days. Once we do that, we say, all right, there's a green light. We can open at that level. But if we go back above that level, red light, we stop everything. And we want to see, again, our criterion met for 14 days before we open back up. The committee does look at other epidemiological criteria, but this is, at its essence, what we're looking at. And as Jennifer said, we really want to maintain online activities regardless. So if you just cannot wait for us to communicate this to you and you want to follow along at home, this is how you do it. You go to this website. So it's the CDC COVID data tracker by county, and got a couple of screenshots here. So if you look at the top, you enter your state, and then Milwaukee County is what we're going to be looking at. And then if you scroll down, you'll scroll past some vaccine information, and then you'll get to this area where it says, it's kind of messy, but 7-day totals. And then in terms of cases here, this is what we mean by incidence. And again, they express this as a number per 100,000. So you can see this number here, 80. This is actually from earlier in the week when I put this together. I have good news for you. That number as of last night is down to 66. That is a 1/3 reduction week over week. We have been achieving that below 100 case count since the 5th of this month, meaning that on January 2nd, we can open up to those memorial services and 25-person outdoor gatherings, assuming we continue on this trajectory. June 2nd, sorry. So here's everything in tabular format. Again, you can see the incidents there on the left. We have our kind of 4 different categories there. And then what's allowed in person and additional things that are allowed outdoors because, again, of the lower transmission there. So I think you all have that in the information we sent out, so I can kind of refer back to that. But Yeah, I'd like to turn it over to Lisa to talk about our precautions. And we just need you to unmute, Lisa.
Thanks, Eric. Our team identified a lot of precautions that are going to be necessary to safely reopen. And a lot of these are going to sound very familiar to everybody. First, I'm going to review the precautions that are going to be in effect for any size of in-person gathering. So this would be possibly starting in the summer if we can open for memorial services soon. Masking will be required at all times in the building. And this will be for staff, members, visitors, anyone 5 and older and without a medical contraindication. They're going to be able to be briefly removed while drinking. Staff will be able to remove masks while working alone in their personal office space. And then they will be using a mask when they leave their office or if someone else comes into their space to work with them. Hand sanitizer is going to be available at designated locations. Staff, members, and visitors are encouraged to use this regularly while in the building. And washing hands with soap and water is preferred when possible. No food is going to be served in the building. So food and snacks will not be a part of small group activities or after service gatherings. This is going to limit the need to unmask. The exception will be that parents and guardians will be able to provide food to young children. Water fountains are going to be turned off. We will have water coolers available for use, and you'll also be able to bring a water bottle to be used outside the sanctuary. Church is going to provide paper cups for water coolers, and no other liquid refreshments will be publicly available. Meaning coffee, tea, the lemonade often found in the common room, because this limiting this is going to also have less time for people being unmasked. There's going to be signage throughout reminding members and visitors of these precautions, and there will be some focused training regarding these precautions that will be provided for ushers and group leaders. As much as possible, we are still requesting that 6 feet of personal distancing will be maintained, and in-person gatherings are going to be kept to a maximum of 2-hour limit. We did a consultation with the Buildings and Grounds Committee, and they provided details for protocols to maximize efficiency while the spaces are in use. There's also going to be the addition of ozone generators that will allow for air cleaning of the building overnight. And then when the incidence falls below 10 per 100,000 and in-person worship's been cleared, these additional precautions will be taken. Speakers at the chancel will be able to remove their masks while speaking. Group singing will not be allowed, but 1 to 2 masked singers will be able to perform. Musicians will be able to perform as long as they can distance. Paper orders of service will not be used, and the offering is going to be welcomed in new touchless receptacles that will be handled by the ushers. And that's it for the precautions that we identified. Now, Eric and I will be able to answer your questions.
Did have a question in the chat, possibly for Jennifer, if all of our clergy are vaccinated.
So I'm not going to share the private health information of other people with their permission, but I can say that I'm vaccinated.
This is BJ. I have my hand raised. Can I ask a question? Okay, I also put this in the Q&A. I would like to know if the church will order and provide window masks for people, for small groups meeting and anyone who is meeting with people in person. I have put in the name of a disposable mask that is approved by the FDA. It is called the Communicator. It is cheaper than another one that is out there, and it is also the first one that's there. I've been using it quite some time. So the website is in the Q&A.
Excellent. Yes, thank you for that. And that's definitely something that we appreciate having that information. With the whole, masking issue, as we see from, the recent guidance Thursday, it's really an open question. And so, yeah, hopefully in 4 months from now, we're not even having to think about that. But yeah, as much as we continue to require masking, we'll get under advisement.
Great. Okay. And I would also like to remind everyone that masks reduce the volume of a speaker by 10 decibels. That is considerable, especially if someone has a soft voice or if they speak very rapidly. So please be attentive and respectful when someone asks you to slow down when speaking. Thank you.
Eric and Lisa, we also had a question about why we're still having touch restrictions when the CDC says that transmissions are airborne.
Yeah, Lisa, you want to take that?
Sure. It really comes from being cautious with, yes, the airborne part, sorry, Eric. People are still going to sneeze in church. They're still going to cough. And we just, with knowing that there's going to be over 100 people in church on a given Sunday, yes, we know that that the CDC is saying it's not required, but we're just going to go with more caution.
And a question from Eileen Tasca, and I think Jennifer sort of answered this with her answer before, but she is asking, why aren't we just asking congregants to volunteer the fact that they're vaccinated to indicate participation ability?
Yeah, and I think it definitely, again, we strongly encourage everyone to be vaccinated. They're very good vaccines. I've been vaccinated. I would knock down any barrier I could to try to get that. We're definitely pushing the way we're living here. That being said, it is information. Anyone is perfectly welcome to volunteer their vaccination status. I have, as Jennifer has. We don't want to make that a precondition of participation.
We also have to remind everyone that even if all the adults upstairs are vaccinated, we still have the children downstairs that are going to be coming up through the hallway. They're not vaccinated. And we're hoping to welcome, visitors that haven't been able to come into church, for the last year and a half. And we're not planning to ask them.
And once we do open up, will there be any limitation or prioritization of who attends, and will it require sign-up?
We aren't planning on any limitations now.
So when we open up, we'll be fully open to participation.
Correct.
Thank you.
I know I'd like to second a couple of the sentiments listed in our Q&A, people commenting on the wonderful, thoughtful, data-driven plan that our reopening team has come up with. I know I myself am a fan of basing these decisions off of data. I think this gives us a wonderful path forward to a future I want to be in.
So this is Jennifer. We've got a question from Deborah Klepp, who's talking about CDC recommendations regarding outdoor gatherings. Lisa or Eric, could you review outdoor gatherings via our policy? What would happen over the summer?
Yeah. So great question. And again, we've already kind of achieved that first goal. We just want to make sure we maintain that for 28 days. So again, June 2nd, if things continue to stay on the current trajectory, we're proposing to allow outdoor gatherings of up to 25 people with the precautions that Lisa went through. We do know that meeting outdoors is very, very safe. Again, we still wanted to put a few precautions on this just because we know that people mean well, but still, distancing sometimes gets a little slack. Maybe the masks don't go on quite as quickly after drinking. So we want to make sure we're still being very safe. But yeah, we're very close, hopefully, to being able to get those things together. So you can start planning those meetings if you want. Start getting that together, and in under 3 weeks, hopefully we'll be able to sanction that. And then hopefully a little bit later in the summer, we can have those larger gatherings like weddings even, once we fall just a little bit lower in that incidence.
So I'm seeing a lot of activity on our Q&A. Again, thank you for all the votes of support. I see Dorothy Sherman asking, with a 10 per 100,000 incident rate, do we think we'll achieve in-person worship? I sure hope at some point we do.
Yeah,
do we think?
And yeah, at that point, the world is going to look really different, in really good ways. And one way that I've told people to think about this is, that means that at that level, you could go into Fiserv Forum with 15,000 people every day for a week, and at most, you probably would have been breathing air of an infected person. 1 to 2 total people that entire time. So it's going to feel really safe once we get there. We'll continue to watch the numbers. We're cautious about things plateauing, but so far, so good.
I see we have a question from Lorraine Jacobs around forum planning. I think it's safe to say that Lorraine and the forum group will work with the office, right, to ensure that their need is met.
Absolutely.
This is Jennifer. I can respond to both the Tescas, Eileen and Courtney, if that's all right.
Please, yeah.
Eileen was asking if people would voluntarily submit their vaccination information. I'm sure that Eileen is aware that we cannot require people to submit that information because of HIPAA, but we are about to share a survey with the entire congregation asking about your needs in a hybrid or multi-platform church world. I will add a question to the survey asking if our members feel comfortable even being asked that question. I'd be curious from our members how people feel about that. So I'll add that question to the survey. And then Courtney asked about multi-platform church. That'll be part of my presentation that's coming up.
All right. Are there any other questions on this topic? I know we look forward to further communications coming out of the office as we proceed. If not, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your hard work in this and for giving us a plan that not only is based on science and data, but also good communication, collaboration with all our members. So we're running a little behind, unless we always do, but I still looking forward to hearing from Reverend Dina.
Hello, First Church. Whoa, that was a big thing we just tackled there and heard about. Would you take a deep breath with me? And let it out. Whew. I love you so much and miss you and hunger like you do to be in the same room together, enjoying each other's embodied presence and participating in that third thing, that wonderful thing that happens when a community gathers, when we become more than the sum of our parts. And I have faith that we will get there safely, carefully, inclusively, and mindfully. Today, I'm just going to lift up a few things. I'm going to lift up our wonderful Minister of Religious Education, Reverend Kimberly Tomczyk Carlson. You may recall in the last church year, in October, First Church was privileged to ordain Kimberly as a Unitarian Universalist minister. And I know that you join me in appreciating Reverend Kimberly and her work with our children, youth, and families during a very challenging year. She has now been our virtual Minister of Religious Education longer than the number of months we knew her in person. Kimberly adapted quickly and creatively during this pandemic, focusing her energies on family ministry, which serves the unique stresses, need for connection, and faith development of families in these times. You know, like I know, that parents are exhausted, teachers are exhausted, healthcare workers are exhausted, delivery workers are exhausted, therapists are exhausted. People are tired and sometimes struggle to show up as their best selves, and they need care. So our overall pandemic priority of care and connection this year resulted in twice as many contacts as the previous year through our pastoral care ministry, through the ministers, the pastoral care associates, the pastoral care providers, the wellness check phone calls, the home grief kits, shawls, phone pals, the COVID candle ritual during worship, and the minister's discretionary fund for financial assistance. We stayed compassionately connected with as many of our members as possible. So I want to appreciate our team of pastoral care associates and thank our outgoing coordinator, Jane Peterson, and our outgoing lead trainer, Lori Peterson, for their work and their ministry. And I want to welcome our new PCA coordinator, Jerry Piercy, and our new co-trainers, Dale Skaggs and Sarah Richards. Currently, we are deep in the recruitment process and training preparations for a new team of pastoral care associates, which happens every 3 years. So thanks to all of you who applied for this important role. I also want to thank Pastoral Care Provider Coordinator Jane Dorweiler and her team of providers who are available to pick up and deliver groceries, prescriptions, and now are doing contactless delivery of meals to church members who need short-term help. Thank you. The focus in adult spiritual development also centered around connection with an emphasis on support for spiritual practice. We had 20 more people than usual participate in theme circles. The weekly Connect and Reflect group, poetry contemplation, and sanctuary reflections gave folks a place to land, a place to find out how their spirits are doing in that moment, to connect with others, and to deepen their spirituality. So I want to thank all the group leaders and facilitators who continue to nurture our spirits and offer space to build community. You're so important. Thank you. As we endure more than a year of pandemic, we have become more aware of our vulnerabilities and inequities in society. We've become more aware of how we rely on one another and how we need each other. We have come to know again the numbness and agony of grief, sometimes both in the same day or both in the same hour, that numbness and that agony. Being human means all of this and more. Being human means that I know that I will lose you. All of us will lose each other, if not sooner than later, because we are mortal. We are mortals, my friend. Our awareness of mortality comes and goes, but mostly this year it came close and caused us to reckon with the meaning of life and death and what is most important. What is most important? Our First Church community is high on the list of most important. I'm grateful to all of you who keep First Church vibrant, flexible, growing, and adapting to meet the moment. At First Church, we will continue to adapt and adapt and adapt with COVID reopening plans, multi-platform church plans, what we hear from you, what's happening in Milwaukee County. But as usual, we do not know what the future may bring. It is reassuring, however, to know that we do have each other to figure it out and to find our way through. And we are finding our way through. It's an honor and a joy, as always, to serve as your associate minister. Thank you for the privilege of being yours. And now let's hear from my dear colleague, Reverend Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Dina. There is a reason that you lead our caring ministries at this congregation. Thank you. First Church, it has been quite a year, and I wanted to start off my remarks today with gratitude. I want to thank you all so much for the ways that you've showed up for one another and for the church this year, from all the pastoral ways that Dina mentioned, but also in your small groups, on your teams and committees. We've continued to do the business of First Church like this over Zoom. People have been so consistent and so loving and so committed to this congregation over the past year when we've had so many different obligations pulling us in different directions. I am grateful to you. You are amazing. Our pledge drive results were astounding. It just shows me that the community is committed to this church and to this congregation. We will be back together soon. I know that we're watching the science and we're going to do it safely, but I know that it will happen. It will happen. Once my loved ones, I ache to be in person with you as much as you all long to be with one another. This year, we have, as Dina said, focused on care and safety. We've prioritized those things. It's been a hard year for our members and friends and staff. It's been hard on the systems of the church. We've had to adapt all of our systems to figure out how to do them online, and I think we've done that fairly successfully. The vast majority of our systems are still in operation, and the ones that are on hiatus are just holding their energy until the work that they have to be done in the world can be done in person again. I do want to say a little bit about our worship numbers. Mark Bender alluded to that. We have about the same number of people watching our Sunday morning worship services online as we have in person, depending on, plus or minus how many computers include 2 or 3 or 4 people. So either a little bit below our average Sunday in-person service to a little bit above, depending on how you calculate that computer figure. But the amazing thing that's been happening is that our reach has almost doubled after the fact. So we have around 550 views per service of each church service on our YouTube channel after the fact. So we're just reaching more people. That's been one of the priorities that we focused on. We have a digital outreach coordinator, Molly Sommerholder, and we've said, in this time where we're all online, let's focus on digital outreach, and it's working. We're broadening our scope and we're connecting to people far away. Our Christmas Eve service had over 2,000 views, and our in-gathering service in September had 1,900 views. So some of our big services are reaching even further. And that brings me to the multi-platform church conversation. So we are planning to do multi-platform church even when we come back in person in the fall. We're figuring that out right now. Just like many churches and many institutions all over the country, we are in adaptation mode. We are learning how to do multi-platform church. In that regard, we're going to send you a survey right after the annual meeting. So, I mean, not like 15 minutes after, I mean, next week, we're sending you a survey that is going to ask you about what your priorities are, you, our First Church members, in terms of multi-platform church. So we do want to provide the opportunity for people to either be in person or come to church online, come virtually. And we're going to have to figure out, we're going to have to make that happen with some priorities in mind, because we can't do every single thing. So we have to choose whether it's more important for a multi-platform, for the online version of church to happen at the same time as the in-person church, or whether it's more important for it to have live music. Is it more important for online church to be in the sanctuary, or is it more important to have this kind of up-close, intimate experience of the online church? So we're going to ask you these questions. So please pay attention to your inboxes. Look at that survey and tell us what your priorities are. When do you think you're going to attend church in person? When do you think you're going to attend church online? How are you making these choices, and what are your priorities? We're learning together. I want to thank you in advance for your patience, both with us figuring out how to do church in person again and how to do it safely, but also with figuring out how to do multi-platform church in ways that are accessible. It's not easy. We saw today, like, technology can be quirky and difficult, but we're figuring it out together. We are committed to inclusion, and we want to know what you're talking about. So, I love you. I'm so grateful to be able to serve you as your senior minister. This is not an easy time, but we are learning and we are growing together. I feel your commitment. Mine is there too. The staff is committed to serving you. And we are committed, I know, together for the long term, for the next 178 years. Thank you, First Church.
Thank you, Jennifer. I think the feeling is mutual from all of us. So that brings us to our new business portion, and thank you everybody for dedicating this time today. It's so great to get these messages and hear from everybody. I believe we have a topic from Lorraine. If anybody has any new business to bring in front of the congregation, please raise your hand or state so in the Q&A.
Mark, we have two people asking if the recording of the meeting will be made public, and where can they find it?
So we are recording this. To be honest, I do not know specifically the details of web hosting the meeting. I can vouch for, we will work with the office staff to make sure that this is positioned someplace that is accessible to our congregation, and that we will communicate said URL so people can access. Unless Jennifer, Sherry, anybody has an immediate answer, please feel free.
We'll figure it out.
It's the mantra of this year. Yes.
This is Sherry, and it would take me about a day to get it loaded up to YouTube, and we can make it available after that.
Thank you, Sherry. Do we have
anything else in the chat or Q&A?
I'm trying to comb it because I thought we had a question about forum. Lorraine, would you like to?
Yes, I didn't know if it was, if I should just jump in or.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, this isn't news, it's an invitation, and I'm going to be reading, so pardon me, I won't be able to have good eye contact. We are inviting you to join the Sunday Forum group. It meets twice each church year, and we select topics and presenters at those meetings. The group ensures a mix of topics intended to interest congregation members, friends, and neighbors. And we believe that with a greater variety of forum group members involved, we are ensuring a broader range of presentations and geographical locations, since we'll probably be doing Zooming too. So please contact us. There are co-leaders, myself, Lorraine Jacobs, and Mark Miller, and we look forward to hearing from you. Even if you just have questions about it, we really would like to speak with you about becoming a member of the Sunday Forum group. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. I see we also have a question from BJ that's been proposed about how one proposes a new committee. I think this is a good opportunity for us to also talk about how the role of the board in that work is changing or has changed, right? So an accessibility committee, if the church were to create such a thing, is a suggestion that I assume should be directed towards Reverend Jennifer in the office. Jennifer, obviously, if the board is aware of it, as the board represents the congregation, we will share that suggestion as well. But the details of whether that's something we have the capacity for, and how and when and who, right, would be details that I would look to Reverend Jennifer and her staff to help us figure out.
Thanks, Mark. We were working on that right before the pandemic hit. And we will figure out when to pick it up back again once we figure out how to reopen church safely and learn how to do multi-platform church.
It's great to hear. It's important to me too. Is there any other new business for us to discuss?
I have a comment. This is Bruce Wiggins. I have my hand raised, so just want to say that we at the Earth Justice Ministry, among other things, are wanting to have outdoor hikes in conjunction with our reopening policies and procedures. So we will be planning outdoor events and hikes, and it's another good way for all our members to connect. So keep an eye out for announcements and Chanticleer articles, especially on the first Saturdays of the month. We will be following the reopening procedures, but it is another way to connect and get out.
Thank you, Bruce. We have one additional question from BJ. I don't know, Jennifer, if you want to field this, whether the digital outreach coordinator is looking to use social media to grow our congregation. I believe that's, that definitely is in the job description of your staff. And I know that's been part of what the strategic planning team has been looking at as well, as far as addressing growth.
The digital outreach coordinator's job description is to build our online audience during the pandemic. As we begin to meet in person, we will be looking at how we can bring folks who have been online into church. The whole point of broadening our reach is to invite people who find us to take one additional step or make one additional move closer to church. So yes, that's part of it. But it's a journey. So folks who are engaged online, first they have to get to know us. Then they have to figure out that they like us. Then they begin to trust us. So yes, it's part of the journey towards growing our membership.
And yes, Diane, I assume the reopening procedures that were shared today are going to be communicated. The details that were contained within will be part of the communication of that reopening plan.
Yes, this is Jennifer again. Our plan was to listen to folks at this annual meeting, listen to the board who met last week, and then revise the procedure, the policy and procedures as appropriate, and release them once we've got them all spiffed up and shiny and clean, ready to go. Our aim is for the end of May, beginning of June. And when they are finalized and we share them with an e-blast with all of our members and friends of the congregation and have them publicly available in obvious places, that's when they will go into effect. So they're not in effect yet because we wanted to get your feedback at this meeting first and then revise them. And then when you see an e-blast from us and very clear communication about them now being finalized, that's when they'll be in effect.
I see some additional comments around using Zoom and sharing forum meetings virtually. I think those are things that could work with the office staff going forward to have them investigate and give us answers. So I'd look to the forum group to explore that. So if there's no additional new business, for the sake of time, I would entertain a motion from the floor to adjourn, as much as it saddens me.
I move to adjourn. This is Alexis.
Thank you, Alexis.
I second the motion. Bernice Popelka.
That was Bernice. So I shall figure this out. There we go. The poll should be appearing. And it has, while we're answering this, it has been my privilege to serve as the congregation's president this year. And I'm very excited with the new slate of board candidates we have going forward and the work that we have ahead of us in the coming year. Thank you so much. And I see, share the results. All right. So as such then, we hereby conclude and adjourn our 2021 annual meeting. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye, all.